Hey guys, tonight we travel back not just a few centuries, but over 4,000 years to the ancient land of the Nile. The moon is rising over the palm-lined banks. You stand barefoot in the marshy edge of the river, your linen tunic already soaked through, and every breath feels like inhaling a hot, damp towel. The distant sound of donkeys braying mixes with the grunts of fishermen hauling in nets, and just over the horizon, the tip of a crumbling pyramid winks at you like a forgotten promise. Welcome to ancient Egypt. You thought you'd walk like an Egyptian. Cute, you can barely stand like one. Your soles are scorched from sun-baked mud, and the moment you try to sit, a beetle with suspicious pincers scurries out from your mat. Luxury is a clay jug of water that doesn't smell like frog. Forget privacy, every movement you make is watched by neighbors, supervisors, and the ever-present ibis that seems way too judgmental for a bird. In this society, status isn't just everything, it's divine. The rich don't walk, they glide. You shuffle. You slap your neck. Yep, that's the 5th mosquito bite already. Others say that's mostly propaganda carved into tombs to keep peasants motivated. Either way, you are very much not a scribe. You're a laborer, and your job today is... A woman shouts at you for spilling her basket of dates. She hurls an insult in Middle Egyptian that roughly translates to donkey-headed dung liquor. Charming, well, TBD. That's right, you're part of the shifting labor pool, which means you go wherever the overseer yells. You're handed a basket, no gloves, and told to scoop up the mud, mix it with straw, and shape it into bricks. Quick hands, lazy mouth, the overseer barks. Great for speed, terrible for durability. Most of what you build today will probably crumble in 50 years. But that's not your concern. Your concern is heat stroke. 2 guys drag him under a sycamore tree while muttering prayers to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of healing. Fringe belief. Some workers carry amulets of her carved from bone. You don't have one. And a bowl of lentils that somehow still has sand in it. You chew slowly. One of your molars cracks. You sigh. You do, however, have a rash developing in places you'd rather not discuss. There's color-bright paints on the walls of noble estates, intricate jewelry glinting on wealthy women's wrists, but also stink. The mosquitoes are out. So are the scarabs. You're sticky, sore, and already dreading sunrise. And somewhere in the distance, a crocodile bellows. You trudge back home. The air is thick with smoke from cooking fires. You pass a street performer balancing a live cobra on his nose. Foreigners aren't welcome. Neither are laborers with missing teeth and crocodile-infested nightmares. You don't flinch, you're too tired to care. It's not slavery, they insist. Just indentured dehydration. Animal dung is everywhere. Children run barefoot through it like it's confetti. You try not to gag. Your first basket is too small. Do you want the whip, little starfish? The overseer yells. You don't ask what starfish means. You just keep working. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Pharaohs rule like gods, and you, well, you're a little lower on the totem pole. Actually, you're not even on the pole. You're already sweating by the time you step outside. The Nile might be sacred, but it's not exactly fragrant. The banks are lined with fish guts, rotting fruit, and the occasional animal carcass. You wrinkle your nose and get moving. You re one of the estimated 2 million laborers trying to stay alive in a society that is both stunningly advanced and cruelly indifferent to your personal comfort. And tell me in the comments where you retuning in from, man, what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've just arrived in the middle of the Old Kingdom, somewhere between the reign of Djoser and Sneferu. The day begins at sunrise. There's no alarm clock, just a low, guttural horn and the shouting of the overseer, who clearly hasn't discovered toothpaste. Your assigned housing is a thatched mud brick hut that gets up to 120 degrees inside by noon. Walking through town, you're immediately struck by the sensory overload. Why would historians still argue whether commoners had a chance to rise through merit in ancient Egypt? Some say scribes could climb the ranks, and today he's yelling to the clay pits. Great. On the way, you step over a bloated goat and nearly twist your ankle in a pothole. You keep walking. Eventually, you arrive at the Nile's edge, where dozens of other workers are already knee-deep in brown sludge. The mud is warm, too warm, and squishy, in a way that suggests it contains more than just clay. Probably excrement. Definitely worms. Fun fact, ancient Egyptian bricks were sun-dried, not kill-fired, a mainstream historical fact. Many laborers on royal construction projects were technically paid with beer, onions, and a handful of bread. Around midday, someone collapses. Heat exhaustion. By evening, your body is a patchwork of sunburn, bruises, and mosquito welts. You make it back to your hut just in time for dinner. A chunk of barley bread with the texture of sandstone as you lie on your mat. Staring at the ceiling, you hear drums in the distance, probably a festival in the noble quarter. You don't dare go. Sleep doesn't come easy. The sun isn't up yet, but your overseer is. His voice tears through the morning haze like a rusty saw through bone. And it's not a dream this time. But don't be fooled. Turn to dry fire by noon. As you trudge with your fellow laborers through the scrub-lined path toward the worksite, the flies are already swarming. One lands on your eyelid, another finds your mouth. Wake up, brick maggots. Pharaoh's not waiting. That sounds noble. It's not. You're not carving intricate hieroglyphs or lifting golden statues. A group of Nubian guards shout at anyone who looks too slow. The foreman, a pot-bellied man with 3 teeth and the attitude of a lion, claps his hands. You don't move. Maybe it'll mistake you for a rock. It doesn't. It climbs the nearest mud brick and vanishes. You try not to think about it. You're on mud brick duty again, but this time you're stacking them, not making them. The sweat in your eyes makes the world shimmer, and you squint up at the blazing orb overhead. No clouds, no birds, just an unrelenting sky that wants you dead. You trudge home with the rest, quiet, defeated. One man sings under his breath a hymn to Hathor, goddess of joy. It sounds like sarcasm. That's it. But the sun is already stabbing at your eyes, and your balance isn't winning any awards. Your hands are still twitching, trying to stack invisible bricks. You smell like donkey sweat and fermented barley. You try to drink from your water jug. A beetle swims in circles inside. You put it down. You remember hearing a tale, whispered among the bricklayers. A man who dug a shallow tunnel under a nobleman's tomb just to sleep in the shade. You imagine you're lying under the stars, cool night air brushing against your face. But really, it's a hot wind swirling sand into your blanket. You cough. Something scurries. A gecko chirps. He was caught. They say his tongue was fed to dogs. Probably an exaggeration, but maybe not. One brick slips from your sweaty grip. You watch it tumble. It lasts 12 minutes. You eat a handful of dried dates and sip water from a cracked clay jug. It tastes like clay. You've heard it before, and it always sounds fake. That workers used to sing songs while building the Great Pyramid, that they were honored like soldiers. They even got beef once a week, a man says with a grin. You've carried hundreds of bricks, probably more. Some have collapsed under your fingers. Others burned your skin when left in the sun too long. You haven't peed all day. You couldn't. Even if you tried, there's nothing left in you but dust. Sure, someone else mutters. And my donkey's a high priest. Your legs are jelly, but you shoulder the final stack and climb once more. The ramp groans. The scaffolding shakes. You place the bricks and come down, every step ringing in your bones like a silent drumbeat of survival. You're told you're lucky last week someone found a drowned rat in theirs. It doesn't hit anyone, thankfully, but the thud it makes against the dry ground below earns you a scowl from a supervisor. You try to move, but your back protests with a stiffness that feels fossilized. Your legs tremble before you've even stood, and your back now has a mysterious clicking noise when you turn too fast. Still, you go back up. You limp outside into a pale orange sky. The desert wind carries a hint of dampness from the nearby Nile. Your job today is different. You've been reassigned to the construction crew working on a governor's tomb. A makeshift ramp leads to the second level of the tomb's frame. Supported by rickety scaffolding that sways like it's had a little too much barley beer, you grab your basket and begin the ascent. Every step wobbles. Every footfall is greeted with splinters and the soft creak of rope that should been replaced last season. The worksite is chaos. Slaves and paid workers move in a miserable balism, hauling bricks. Others hauling water. Others hauling themselves out of fainting spells. You, new guy, climb. You look up top. Your job is simple. Stack the bricks straight. You mutter a sorry in a language you barely speak. Ancient Egyptian is tonal, precise, and utterly unforgiving. Say are wrong, and you might be praising the sun or calling someone's mother a fish. Historians still argue whether foreign laborers were given language training or just shouted at until they figured it out. A scorpion scuttles past your foot. By midday, the heat becomes apocalyptic. Your linen tunic clings to you like wet paper. Time slows. Your thoughts drift. You come down for your one break of the day. Someone else shares a story about the old pyramid days. Your arms ache like they're made of lead. Your hands are blistered, your knees bruised. By the time the sun begins its descent, your sense of time is warped. Just when you think it's over, the foreman shouts, "Last load," you groan. When you're finally released, the sun is bleeding over the horizon. Back in your hut, you collapse. Your eyes close, but your mind won't follow. And just before sleep claims you, you realize something terrible. Tomorrow, you'll be assigned to mudbrick duty again. Your third morning in ancient Egypt begins not with a sunrise, but with the jarring clang of a copper bell. The sound slices through your dreams like a sickle through barley. You roll over, only to remember there's no mattress, just a reed mat barely softer than the floor itself, and says something that makes the others snicker. You catch one word: household. Sounds like a promotion, not quite. You've been reassigned to a noble's estate to do general labor. You're now officially someone's living broom. A guard eyes you, shrugs, and lets you in. You're led to the back, where the servants' courtyard bustles with activity. Laundry slaps against stone basins, cooks argue over garlic portions, and a goat tries to eat someone's sandals. The noble family has ceramic pots better than squatting over a pit butt. Someone has to carry those pots out, scrub them, and replace them with fresh sand. That someone is you. Pottery chamber pots were reserved for the elite. Most just went wherever goats went, every single day. The stench is so thick you can taste it. A cat watches you from a ledge, tail twitching, judging. You think of petting it, bad idea. There are reports, some true, some possibly exaggerated, of people being executed for harming cats. So you keep your hands to yourself. That's when you remember another sad reality. Theft among servants wasn't just punished with dismissal. Sometimes it meant branding, or the loss of a hand. You keep your gaze down. No onions. Today apparently the household is running low. You sit with the others under a sycamore tree. Menka is telling a story about a man who fell asleep while sweeping the temple and was possessed by a spirit that made him bark like a dog for a week. You try to smile, but your stomach's twisting, not from laughter, just from the beer, which may or may not have included some extra flavor from the storage jar. Lizard resident. Every muscle protests. Your hands look worse than yesterday, blistered, raw, and coated in a layer of dried mud that refuses to come off. One toddler throws a piece of dried dung at your head. You take it. You don't complain. Why? Because their father is the noble whose floor you scrubbed earlier, and if you make one wrong move, you'll be reassigned again, maybe to quarry duty, maybe worse. It sounds easier until you realize Egyptian laundry involves hauling giant clay tubs of water, mashing clothes with your bare feet, and wringing them dry in the sun. Just a battered bronze disc with the noble's family mark stamped into it. You're told it can buy you 3 onions or 1 fish head. Luxury. If you squint, it's brutal, slippery, and every drop of water is dragged from a cistern a dozen steps away. It's beautiful, breathtaking, even for a moment. You forget about the smell, the bruises, the gnawing hunger. You wonder how they stay so white. Then you realize most people only own 2 outfits, one to wear, one to wash. No wardrobe dilemmas here. You're starting to smell like a compost heap left out in the sun, which, coincidentally, is exactly where you're headed again. Today, though, there's a change. You're not going back to the construction site. The foreman points at you, squints. You sweep the floor more out of ceremony than effectiveness, since the wind just blows sand right back in. You're not allowed to make eye contact with the noblewoman of the house. She passes through a corridor with a perfume cloud trailing behind her, strong enough to knock a pigeon out of the air. You shuffle behind a short, wiry man named Menka, who's chewing on something green and smells like onions left in a leather pouch too long. He doesn't say much as he leads you through a series of narrow alleys, each one more pungent than the last. Everyone's shouting. The air smells like honey and rot. A monkey darts past, snatches a fig from a child's hand, and disappears into a rooftop with the precision of a trained thief. You nearly laugh until Menka grabs your arm and pulls you forward. You pass the marketeer first real look at Egyptian city life, and it's overwhelming. There are stalls made of wood and woven reeds, loaded with pomegranates, fish, papyrus, scrolls, linen, spices, and what looks suspiciously like grilled lizard on a stick. You arrive at a large two-story home with whitewashed walls and narrow slits for windows. Your job, cleaning everything, especially the latrines. You quickly learn that toilet in this era is a very optimistic term, and here's a mainstream historical fact. While Egypt is known for its divine architecture and advanced writing systems, sanitation for most people was rudimentary. You dump the waste into a trench behind the estate where it's mixed with refuse and the occasional dead bird. Here's a quirky tidbit. Killing a cat in ancient Egypt, even by accident, was considered a crime against the gods. Entire households mourned feline deaths. Inside the estate, it's cooler, shaded, and filled with the soft whisper of expensive linen. You sneak a look at her golden earrings. Later, you're assigned to help with laundry. By mid-afternoon, you're allowed to eat. The servant's meal is basic: lentils, barley bread, and watered beer. Historians still argue whether that was a demon, he says with a wink, or just fermented fig wine. The others laugh. After lunch, you clean more latrines, then the animal pens, then the children's room. At dusk, the estate quiets. You're sent back to your hut with a single coin, not gold, not even silver. As you return home, dust rising with every step, you catch a glimpse of the sun dipping behind the palms, setting fire to the horizon. Then a mosquito lands on your lip, and the dream ends. By now, you've learned something critical about ancient Egypt. Nobody cares about your comfort, not the sun, not your boss, and definitely not the brick you just stepped on barefoot. Think again. You're not shopping, you're hauling. The estate steward has selected you to accompany him to the market, which means you'll carry bundles of papyrus, jugs of barley beer, and perhaps a live goose if one flaps your way. It's an upgrade from latrines, but just barely. Your fourth morning starts with your ankle twisted, your eye swollen from a mysterious bite, and a mysterious red streak creeping up your arm. Merchants holler over each other, holding up everything from alabaster jars to strings of dried fish. Perfume vendors fill the air with clouds of myrrh. A butcher hacks into a hanging slab of meat with a flint blade that probably hasn't been washed since the reign of Khufu. Flies swarm in thick spirals over every surface. You suspect infection, but unless you know a priest or a snake with healing powers, your best bet is to suck it up and hope for the best. Even peasants wore it when they could afford it. Of course, you haven't seen a mirror in 4 days, so for all you know, your eyeliner is actually bird droppings. A child slips in it. The scribe, older man with ink-stained fingers, sits beneath a linen canopy, writing spells from the Book of the Dead. You lean closer. No one reacts. These words aren't for your kind. Today is market day. Sounds fun, right? A chance to explore, barter, see exotic goods and foods. The jugs dig into your collarbone. A goose bites your knuckles. You wonder how long it would take to learn them. A lifetime, maybe more. You also remember hearing that scribes were one of the only ways to climb the social ladder in Egypt. If you could read and write, you could work in temples, royal courts, even track grain taxes. He hisses through his teeth, grabs you by the tunic, and mutters, "You'll pay for that." You want to ask how, but he's already walking away, generous. It's filled with seeds that crack between your molars like gravel. Delicious, You suspect he just doesn't want to look at your face. You curse quietly, but a nearby priest glances at you, frowns, and whispers a prayer. Your feet are swollen, your shirt is stained with goose blood and fig juice, and your dignity is in pieces somewhere near the butcher's stall. It's cooler tonight. A breeze flutters the edge of your mat. Somewhere a harp plays a slow tune, a servant lullaby, maybe. For a moment you imagine being rich, sipping cool date wine, reclining on a shaded terrace, someone fanning you lazily, like being struck by lightning. But the lightning is made of hieroglyphs and educational privilege. You yelp, it's another frog. Or was it a mouse? You don't want to know. You wonder if that was for your soul or against it. The sun reflects off the limestone buildings, stabbing at your eyes. A nobleman passes on a litter, carried by 4 servants. You make the mistake of staring too long. One of the guards raises an eyebrow and mutters something about eye removal. It smells worse than the latrines. Children splash in it anyway. You spot a floating fish belly up, swirling lazily. A few older women are washing their laundry just downstream. One of them waves at you. You wave back, forgetting you're holding a jar. It slips, crashes, and shatters on the stone path. The market in the capital city of Memphis is a pulsing organism of chaos. Stone streets blister under the sun. A donkey defecates. You follow the steward closely, carrying his purchases as your arms grow numb. As you pass a jewelry stall, you're momentarily dazzled. A necklace of faience beads, bright turquoise and orange, glimmers in the sunlight. A woman in elaborate makeup green malachite and black kohl leans over the stall and flashes a toothy smile. She's clearly not a laborer, maybe a singer or a temple acolyte. You think about saying something witty. Then you remember, you're drenched in sweat, covered in goose scratches, and smell like boiled lentils and regret. She wrinkles her nose and turns away. You sigh. But hey, here's something interesting. Cosmetics in Egypt weren't just fashionable. Kohl eyeliner reduced glare from the sun and may have had antibacterial properties. You stop at a scribe's booth while the steward inspects scrolls. Back away, he says, without looking up. You're kind, right? Laborer, gooseboy, human wheelbarrow. Still, you notice the delicate reed brush in his hand, the graceful symbols flowing across the papyrus. Historians still argue whether peasants ever became scribes. Most agree. It's rare. Not impossible, just unlikely. You continue hauling goods through the marketplace, ducking under awnings, dodging runaway pigs, stepping over the tail of a sleeping dog. You look at your feet. Eventually, you reach the storage house. You unload the goods, one jar at a time. Your back screams. The steward offers you a single dried fig. On the walk back, you pass a canal. Everyone goes silent. The steward's face turns a shade of purple previously unseen in nature. You apologize profusely. You're sent back to your hut early to reflect, he says. Back home, you finally take a moment to breathe. You lie down, letting the night air touch your skin. Then something cold and squishy crawls across your chest. You roll over and hope morning never comes. The day doesn't begin so much as ambush you. A loud squelch under your sleeping mat jolts you awakes. Something has burst. You sit up too fast, whack your head on the low doorway, and blink into the murky light. Whatever exploded beneath you smells like fermented fish and garlic. You're limping, that bite on your arm. It's turned a nice shade of blackish red. and your elbow barely bends. You consider asking for medicine. Then you remember what medicine means here. You lift the mat and find the remains of a crushed toad. Perfect. A warning from the gods. Or maybe just poor rodent control. No time to think. You're already late. He doesn't greet you. He just grabs your arm, sniffs, it then grins. Ah, the sickness of swamp demons, he mutters. You throw on your stiff linen tunics, till crusted with sweat and mystery stains, stumble into the alley. You ask anyway. One worker suggests you're cursed now. Another whispers that the bite might turn you into a ghoul. You try to laugh, but feel suddenly very aware of your own pulse. It involves stomping through muddy canals, hauling baskets of silt, and trying not to get your legs eaten by anything lurking in the murky water. The Nile looks serene from a distance. Up close, it's a war zone of insects, sharp shells, and unseen wiggling things. The steward squints at your arm, shrugs, and sends you to the village Sunua, local healer, not officially attached to a temple. You dig until your back goes numb. Your hands are too sore to grip anything tightly, so you start using your forearms. A supervisor walks by, glances at you, and says, "Lazy arms, lazy afterlife," which means he's cheap, available, and likely to kill you by accident. His hut is filled with incense smoke and stacked jars, labeled in crude hieroglyphs. You hope he's joking. You yank yourself out of the water, so fast you fall backward into the mud. You met the river's blessing, he says. You're not blessed. You're soaked, shaking, and trying not to cry in front of a dozen strangers. That's the benefit package. Not the whole animal, just a glimpse. Not for rest, just to help crush limestone into powder for paint. Ancient pain relief, mildly effective, potentially addictive. Never tested by modern labs, barely. The pain in your arm fades to a dull throb. You're still sweating, but not hallucinating. Yet, it's dusty, miserable, and makes your throat feel like you've been licking chalk. But it's dry, and dry is better than wet right now. But it's enough. He isn't. Revered in some temples, Yasabik, the crocodile god, had his own cult but feared everywhere else. One of them wears a crocodile amulet and chases her brother with a stick, yelling, "I am Sobik, I eat your toes." They were given names. They had priests. One even received daily meals of honey-roasted fish. And if you think modern crocs are scary, imagine one the size of a small boat, living in a sacred river with divine immunity. Or maybe you just got lucky. You whisper a thank you to any spirit who'll listen. Then, without meaning to, you fall asleep, sitting up, leaning against the wall. You spot ingredients: moldy bread, goose fat, a crushed scarab, and something that might be donkey urine. He tells you to hold still. You don't. He slathers the brown sludge over the wound with alarming confidence and wraps it in linen. He begins mixing something in a bowl. It smells like mildew and despair. There, sacred dung compress. You'll be fine. Then a cloud of flies descends, and someone hands you lunch, barley bread with fish paste. No one mentions the crocodile again. He also gives you an amulet made from baked clay. It's supposed to ward off disease-bearing spirits. You wonder if it's also waterproof. You return to your labor post, stinking like a barn floor, wrapped in filth, holding a rock on a string like it's magical armor. Everyone avoids standing near you. By mid-morning, your arm is pulsing to your job today. Helping with river irrigation. Sounds relaxing, not even close. You're assigned to clean out a blocked channel with a half-broken hoe. You resist the urge to throw the hoe at his head. Barely. Around noon, it happens. You're waist deep in silt when you feel a powerful bump against your thigh. You freeze. Another bump. Something big swims past your leg. A crocodile tail breaks the surface. Ancient Egyptian crocodiles weren't pets. They were apex predators. Quirky fact: in certain temples, mummified crocodiles were offered to sobicraft in linen, sometimes even decked out in gold. You, however, almost became that meal. You're pulled from the canal by a fellow worker. He's laughing. They let you take a break after that. You sit on a pile of rocks, clutching your lucky dung bandage, wondering if this is the low point. Historians still argue whether Nile workers received hazard pay. Most evidence suggests ... no. You're lucky to be alive. Later that day, you're reassigned to the shade tent. You cough violently. Someone hands you a strip of papyrus to chew. It tastes awful, but numbs your throat, probably soaked in poppy extract. You survive the afternoon. You return home at sunset. Children play with clay dolls in the dust. You smile weakly. In your hut, you peel off the compress. It smells worse than earlier, but the redness has receded. Maybe the scarab dung helped after all. You dream of water, still dark water, something just beneath the surface, watching. You're back at it before the sky even begins to glow. The moon is still hanging overhead, dim and fat, like it hasn't finished its shift yet. You haven't either. Your limbs feel like they've been dried in the sun. Your eyes burn from sand and smoke, and the scab on your arm has cracked open again, right through the dung bandage zone. But this time, there's no time for a healer. You've been summoned to the temple. Don't get excited. You're not becoming a priest or anything remotely divine. You're assigned to temple duty, the sacred but soul-sapping job of cleaning and maintaining the house of the gods, which, considering it's already 102 degrees Fahrenheit inside, is more of a cosmic joke than a guideline. He gives you a glance that lingers on your cracked feet, the bruises on your arms, and your still bleeding bug bite. Very bad luck. Sounds prestigious, and technically it is, but mostly for the temple, not for you. You're the janitor of Are's living room. The high priests had real power. Some say they rivaled the pharaohs, supposed to be a symbol of rebirth and purity. In practice, it's a haven for bugs and one very aggressive frog who refuses to leave. You name him Heka. He hisses at you. You respect that. Working inside one, even as a laborer, put you close to that power, but not close enough to avoid cleaning vomit from the foot of a statue. After a goat escaped a ritual offering and caused panic in the incense room, you arrive at the outer courtyard of a massive limestone temple, its facade painted in brilliant reds and blues, though much of the color is fading, and been yelled at for humming a love song under your breath. You do it too fast and nearly drop the burner. The head priest glares at you, then mutters something about foreign labor. You feel a cold shame settle behind your ribs. A dog follows you for a while, then stops when it realizes you don't have food. Even the strays here are elitist. Apparently Hathor doesn't appreciate being serenaded while you sweep her sanctum. It's made of blue-glazed faience, shaped like a tiny eye. You stare at it. Does it work? Did it stop the bug bite from turning fatal? Did it scare off the crocodile? Or is it just another trinket for keeping you quiet? Not with gratitude, not with pay, just with a flick of the wrist and a whispered, "Return before sunrise." Still, The place is majestic. Columns soar like petrified trees, covered in intricate carvings. The priest pours it into your cupped hands himself, like he's feeding a stray animal. You're grateful anyway. You'd admire it more if you weren't. Being handed a broom made of bundled palm fibers and a large bucket of water that smells like boiled hay. You, however, are not allowed to stop working. The sun is now high overhead, baking the stone around you to the point where sitting on the floor is like sitting on a stove. You lift an urn to move it and feel a sharp tug in your back. Something pops. Not metaphorically. You actually hear a pop. It's required. Not singing is considered disrespectful. There's a story whispered among the workers about a boy who fainted during a ritual and was locked in a grain bin for purification. Historians still argue whether that was punishment, superstition, or just some twisted rite of passage. You re-given a line to repeat in Middle Egyptian that probably means, "Blessed be the creator of light." You, however, have so much dust in your armpits, it could be carbon dated, but you cut and help wondering if you actually chanting something like, "I am the beetle who lives in regret," a bald priest, face powdered and eyes rimmed in thick kohl, instructs you to begin by scrubbing the bird droppings off the base of the statue of Thoth, god of wisdom. You wonder if Thoth ever considered hiring pigeons with better aim. You get to work, knees cracking on cold stone, brushing dried dung from the feet of gods, while chanting softly along with the temple choir. Temple rules are strict. You must be barefoot. You must not speak unless addressed. You must not sweat near sacred altars. The head priest walks past, fanning himself with a palm leaf. "Don't die near the altar," he says flatly. "Thanks," you mutter. "Very helpful." Here's your mainstream historical fact. Egyptian temples weren't just places of worship, they were economic engines. Libraries, banks, and political headquarters. That was your second task of the day. Your third, clearing out the sacred pula, shallow stone basin filled with stagnant water and rotting lotus petals. By midday, the priests begin their fast. No food, no drink, just chanting and silence. You pause, clutch your side, try not to look weak. Weakness at the temple is ... inconvenient. By late afternoon, you've wiped down 9 statues, removed what felt like a full tomb's worth of spiderwebs. You're allowed a single gulp of water. Quirky tidbit. Some priests shaved every hair on their bodies including eyebrows to remain ritually clean. Evening comes. The final rite begins. You're told to line up with the others and wave incense over a sacred idol. After the ritual, you are dismissed. You trudge out into the night, the stone of the courtyard still warm under your blistered feet. You get back to your hut, collapse against the wall, and take the sacred amulet from your neck, the one the priest gave you for protection. You tuck it under your mat and close your eyes. The temple bell rings in the distance, announcing the night prayer. Before the stars have fully faded, you reawake, if awake is the right word for the way your eyelids twitch and your body moves like wet wood. Your first thought isn't even coherent, just a sensation. Your entire torso aches like you've been stepped on by a ceremonial ox. You just stopped moving and, apparently, survived the night. Your back is locked. Your shoulders grind. Your neck cracks when you breathe. You don't remember falling asleep. You head back to the temple in the dark, stomach gurgling with emptiness and nerves. Mourners shuffle through the courtyard in linen wrappings, wailing in staggered bursts, louder when priests are nearby, quieter when they pass. It's part tradition, part performance, part spiritual Yelp review. The moon hangs low behind the palms, like it's watching you with concern. Today, you're not on cleaning duty. You're on funeral preparation. Inside, it smells like resin, cedar oil, and other things. Canopic jars. These, you're told, hold the stomach, lungs, intestines, and liver. Very important, the priest warns. Do not drop. I'm going to be sacrificed for breaking sacred pottery. Then he gives you a pat on the head, like a dog. A body lies stretched on a wooden platform, arms at its sides, skin darkened and waxy. You try not to look too long. You definitely try not to breathe too deeply. The official must be interred on schedule before his soul gets bored or lost or eaten by Ametha. Part crocodile, part hippo, part lion, devourer of unworthy hearts. That's a real thing. Look it up, or better yet, don't. You're not cutting anyone open. Thank every god for that, but you are on material transport. They understood decomposition, knew how to remove moisture, and used salt and oils to preserve tissue. It took 70 days to prepare a proper burial. That means lifting heavy jars, hauling linens soaked in God knows what, and emptying basins of mysterious fluids that smell like vinegar and burnt fish. You don't know what's in this body. You don't want to know. One of the assistants giggles nervously as he lifts the left leg, and something ... rattles. The death of a high-ranking official has turned the temple into a frenzy of activity. Later, you'll hear someone mutter that the deceased owed her father 3 goats and a vineyard. Or, if corrupt priests offered them to wealthy merchants on the side. Smearing resin along strips of linen that will wrap the body, children gawk. You spot your old overseer from brick duty. He doesn't recognize you, that's fine. You barely recognize yourself. The mummy is carried on a sledge pulled by oxen. You and a few other grunts haul the extra supplies, grave goods, oil jars, baskets of bread, and a bundle of items you recognize from the noble's house. You help unload the jars and gifts, arranging them on niches carved into the walls. The priest begins the final ritual, the opening of the mouth, where he touches the mummy's lips with a special blade so the dead can speak, eat, and breathe in the afterlife, including his favorite stool. You know this because you stubbed your toe on it 2 days ago while sweeping. The oxen are led away, and you're left in the heat, covered in resin, sweat, and existential dread. The smell is overpowering, sticky, and sweet like pine tar, but with something darker underneath. You get some on your hands, and it won't come off. It's in your nails, your hair, your dreams, probably. Another swears he felt a breeze inside the tomb. You all laugh. A little too hard. Your role, assisting the sun cooks the tent like a bread oven. Sweat rolls down your spine. 2 female mourners flank her, shrieking so loudly it hurts, tight, constricting. You try to scream, but your mouth won't open. You forgot the ritual. You'll never speak again. It's all very theatrical. She approaches the wrapped body, kneels, and whispers something. Then she does the unexpected. She laughs. One of the younger priests begins vomiting into a corner after catching a whiff of the viscera bowl. You're slightly reassured that even temple kids can't stomach this. Now, embalming in ancient Egypt is sacred business, reserved for elites. It's a complex process involving rituals, tools, and enough natron to dehydrate a camel. The embalming tent is a half-covered structure behind the temple. A priest instructs you to carry 4 alabaster jars, each one topped with a carved head falcon, jackal, baboon, and human. You don't, but your arms are shaking by the time you reach the offering table. One jar does slip, just a nudge, a wobble. The jackal lid clatters to the ground. Everyone freezes. The priest gasps. You freeze, thinking, this is it. But the priest just grumbles, retrieves it, and sets it back in place with a gentle pat. You say thank you. Of course you do. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian mummification wasn't just spiritual, it was scientific. But you don't have 70 days. You have until sunset. Your next task. Quirky tidbit. Some embalmers used beeswax to seal wounds, and others stuffed the body with sawdust or lichen to give it shape. Historians still argue whether the more elaborate mummification techniques were reserved strictly for royalty. Someone says beside you. You nod as if you understood a word of that. By midday, you're drenched again. But the strangest moment of the day comes when the widow arrives. She's veiled, of course, in flowing white linen and golden bangles, her eyes painted into dramatic tears. Just a short, bitter chuckle, almost inaudible. Then she stands, composes herself, and exits. The priests pretend not to have noticed. You definitely pretend. Marriage, Egyptian style. The final stage of your job involves assisting in the procession, a slow walk from the temple to the tomb site. As you walk through the dusty path, people step aside. The tomb is simple compared to royal crypts, but well made. Limestone walls, a painted ceiling of stars. You try not to make eye contact with the corpse. When it's done, you bow, step out, and the tomb is sealed behind you. Silence follows. The widow's cries fade into the distance. You trudge home with the others, too tired to talk. One man jokes that he saw the corpse wink. That night, you dream of linen wrapping your own body. You wake up gasping. The moon is full overhead, and tomorrow, another funeral's already on the schedule. Your dreams are getting weirder. Last night, it was all scarabs crawling out of your mouth while you floated down the Nile in a boat made of bread. This morning, you wake up with a dry tongue, burning eyes, and a tiny pebble lodged in your ear. You shake it out. It rattles against the floor. Somehow, it feels symbolic. Before you've even had a moment to stretch, the call comes. You're being reassigned again. The soil is dense and sticky, not the soft earth you imagined. Your hands, still cracked from resin and silt, feel like they're splitting all over again as you grip the wooden hoe. Every time you bend, your spine sends an urgent memo that says, please stop before we collapse entirely. Not back to the temple, nor to brick duty. This time, it's field labor. It's hot, mushy, and you drop half of it into the trench by accident. You eat the rest without chewing. He rides a donkey with an attitude problem and a limp. The donkey, not Sob Kotep, probably. One swears the river is sacred. The other claims it's full of ghosts. Historians still argue whether the Nile was viewed more as a deity or a resource. Someone says, as if they know what a historian is. At one point, you think you see someone walking across the field, wrapped in bandages like a mummy. Turns out, it's just a farmer, covered in linen, to keep the flies out. Clever, suffocating, but clever. Believing it made the crops grow better. You try humming a lullaby you remember from temple duty. The man beside you joins in. For a few seconds, it almost feels peaceful. agricultural work under the supervision of a mid-level official named Sobkotep, who, rumor has it, was kicked by a donkey in his youth and never fully recovered. Not a crocodile, this time thank the gods, but a swarm of insects. Not enough to buy a chicken, but maybe enough to trade for one egg. Bright music, dancers with painted faces, children waving palm branches. It's for Bastet, the cat goddess. You pause to watch. Someone hands you a date. You eat it without thinking. If the vendor likes you, he probably doesn't. Small black flies, angry and relentless. They bite every exposed inch of skin. You slap your arm, you slap your neck. Of course, you got blessed/cursed by a ceremonial feline. Why not? You swat so hard you nearly fall into your own trench. Sobkotep just laughs and fans himself with a lotus leaf. Water is needed on the far side of the estate before sundown. Now I dig with a stick first, he says, stabbing the earth before each scoop. You mimic him. You don't have the emotional capacity to deal with another crocodile incident. The mud clings to your feet like wet cement. You try to step but lose your sandal. Too bad. The other one's falling apart anyway. Maybe it does. You're too tired to care. Horemheb looks down and shrugs. The gods will clean it, he says. You glance at the sun already, halfway through its arcane sigh. Spiritually, that is. Physically, he's fine enough to shout at people with a staff and chew lotus seeds loud enough to echo across the delta. You're led out of the city, across the cracked stone paths, and past the canals into a wide expanse of rich green land along the Nile. It's a welcome break from the temple walls and urban dust, but don't let the scenery fool you. This is back-breaking work. You're handed a cup of murky water. You drink it anyway. You tell yourself the floating specks are herbs. They are not herbs. First assignment, redigging irrigation trenches. The sun is already high. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egypt's agricultural cycle was based entirely on the Nile's flooding. After the floodwaters receded, the black silt left behind made the fields incredibly fertile. But if the irrigation system failed, famine, disease, panic, no pressure, you're told to dig fast. The farmer next to you, a wiry man named Horemheb, tells you he once saw a crocodile crawl into a flooded trench and disappear. Your lunch is a handful of lentils wrapped in a fig leaf. Halfway through the day, Sobkotep arrives to inspect, by which he means glare, chew seeds, and occasionally whack the ground near your feet to motivate you. You overhear a heated debate between two laborers. Was the Nile created from the tears of Isis, or is that just poetic nonsense? Then it happens again. You retreat into a haze of buzzing and sweat. Afternoon arrives with heat so intense, you swear you're being steamed like a dumpling. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptian farmers sometimes sang while they worked. Then you step on something sharp, a broken pot shard buried in the dirt. Blood wells up between your toes. You hiss through your teeth. They don't. By sundown, the canal is finished. You are not. You're sore, sunburned, and so dehydrated your tongue feels like it's covered in linen. The steward gives you a copper token for your labor. On the way back to your hut, you pass a festival procession on the edge of the city. A cat rubs against your leg. You smile. Then it bites you and runs. You stare at the tiny puncture wounds on your ankle. You limp the rest of the way home, lay down on your mat, and watch as a beetle climbs across your foot like it owns the place. Tomorrow, you're told, you'll be in the granaries. You don't know what that means yet, but somehow, you know it's going to hurt. You wake up coughing, a dry, hacking kind of cough that feels like it's trying to remove your lungs by force. Your mouth is coated in something gritty, and you soon realize it's dust. Your whole face is covered in it. Even your eyelashes crunch when you blink. Why? Because today you're in the granaries. Towering mud brick walls surround several storage buildings, each filled with, well, not exactly treasure, unless you consider grain a form of treasure. Spoiler, in Egypt it was. Barley and emmer wheat were more than food, they were currency. Taxes were paid in grain, wages too. You could trade it for beer, bread, fabric, even a spot on a barge if you were lucky. So yes, you're basically about to spend the day handling literal money, crumbly, sneeze-inducing money. Ah yes, the beating, moldy heart of Egypt's economic system. She's sharp-eyed, sandal-footed, and speaks with the kind of precision that makes everyone around her straighten up and nod a lot. You're given a stick and told to poke the sacks and listen. You yelp, drop the stick, and stumble backward into a pile of barley sacks, sending a cloud of dust into the air that could choke a hippo. Crunchy is good, says one of the older workers. Squishy is bad. She takes one look at you and sighs like she's already disappointed. The granaries are a massive compound on the edge of the city. You're greeted by the granary overseer, woman named Meripta. You'll be on dust duty, she says. They hold giant pestles and rhythmically pound barley and emmer into flour. You're handed your own pestle. It's pounding, lifting, pounding against shoulders, grinding arms, screaming. The woman next to you has biceps like woven rope. Your future bones, apparently, are being carved into history even now. You suspect she could snap a crocodile in half with her elbows. She offers you a tight smile, then doubles her pace just to show off. This involves pouring flour through a woven reed screen to remove pebbles, beetles, and anything else that doesn't belong in a loaf of bread. The overseer groans audibly. Someone mutters, maybe send him back to the latrines. The air here is even worse. You're coughing, flour clouds, your skin itches, even if it smells like donkey. Each sack weighs more than a goat and is balanced badly. You stagger under the weight. You drop to the boatman swears at you in thick dialect. He spits in your direction. You definitely understand that. There is flour in your eyebrows, your ears, and places flour was never meant to go. You nod along like you're in on the debate. Really, you're just trying to stay awake. You pass a group of musicians playing flutes and clapping in slow rhythm. Children dance around them, laughing. You try to smile, but your lips are caked in flour. Still not enough for chicken. You consider trading your sandals instead. Then remember, you stepped in fish guts 2 days ago, and no sane person would accept them. One man insists the pharaoh himself sometimes visited the granaries to bless the harvest. Another claims that it's just a myth and the pharaoh would unstep within a mile of rat droppings. You lie there in silence, covered in grain dust, rat scratches, and the growing suspicion that you've become part of the granary yourself. Like maybe tomorrow they'll try to mill you into flour. It's taller than your torso and heavier than your regrets. You're handed a torch coated in thick black resin necessary for light, hazardous for breathing, and a broom made of palm fronds. The air inside is already thick with floating husks and floury particles. After 2 steps, your nostrils are clogged. Perfect. Dust duty means climbing into the upper lofts, where the grain is stored, and making sure the sacks are sealed, unspoiled, and pest-free. Within an hour, your throat feels like you've been snorting powdered pottery. Your eyes are red, your fingernails are black, and you're pretty sure you swallowed a beetle. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians stored grain in both jars and silos, and they had surprisingly sophisticated systems for inventory. Officials tracked who brought in how much, from which field, and when. Errors meant punishment. Stealing meant mutilation. This isn't your average warehouse. It's a sacred vault of national survival. You're tasked with checking for mold and rat damage. On your third poke, something hisses and darts out a huge rat, tail like a rope, teeth like punishment. Everyone laughs, except Maripetta. You're reassigned, again, this time, grain pounding. You're led to a wide courtyard with shallow stone basins, where rows of laborers are already at work. The first thing you learn, this is not elegant work. There is no smooth, satisfying motion. You try to match her mistake. Your arms give out after 5 minutes, and your pestle slips and lands directly on your foot. You bite your lip and nod like nothing happened. She nods back. You both understand the lie. Quirky tidbit. Some granary workers developed repetitive stress injuries so specific archaeologists can spot them in ancient skeletons. During your brief lunch half, a loaf of stale barley bread and a sip of watery beer, you overhear a heated debate. Historians still argue whether those royal visits were real or ceremonial, someone says. After lunch, you're put on sifting duty. At one point, you sneeze so violently, you knock the entire screen off the platform. You volunteer to clean up. It's not humility, it's just an excuse to step outside for one breath of semi-clean air. As the sun begins to set, you're tasked with loading flour sacks onto a waiting barge. By nightfall, you're dismissed with another copper token. You walk home, arms like cooked noodles, back crooked like a plow. Back in your hut, you collapse without washing. You whisper good night to the scarab amulet under your mat. It does not whisper back. You wake up with your jaw clenched so tightly, it takes actual effort to unlock it. Every muscle in your arms twitches from yesterday's flour-based torture, and your back feels like someone shoved a grinding stone beneath your skin. Today, you're headed to the river docks. When you sit up, your tunic puffs a small cloud of flour dust into the air. You sneeze, then sneeze again. Then just accept that sneezing is part of your morning routine now. A barge glides past, its linen sail rippling gently. But you're not here to enjoy the view. You're here to load cargo and unload and load again for hours. No time for pity. It's a different kind of miserable out there. The Nile in the morning is oddly beautiful. The captain, clearly annoyed that you're breathing his air, warns you not to damage anything. You nod obediently, then immediately trip over a rope and nearly drop a basket of scrolls into the Nile. One barge arrives with live poultry, chickens in red cages, honking geese, and even 2 tethered ibises, meant for temple offerings. You're told to help offload them. These amphorae are packed with fish oil, beer, dried figs, lentils, dates, and unfortunately some not-so-dried fish, and that scent. You sit on the edge of the dock, feet dangling above the water. You not saying you believe it, but when a cold breeze slithers up your neck from the water, You decide to stop making eye contact with it just in case. The river looks peaceful here, broad and slow. You stare into the greenish depths and wonder just how many crocodiles are down there, biding their time. But it also meant you were one slip away from sinking into the mud forever. It's filled with sealed jars that contain offerings no one wants to talk about. You start praying to every god, Unora, Isis, Sobek, even the goose that bit you. You're told to remove them carefully and do not open them. You ask why. The foreman just says, "Last guy who did. His nose never worked again. It sticks." The foreman sighs, then mutters, "Well, the grain taxes for Upper Egypt just disappeared." You drop one. It doesn't break, but the liquid inside sloshes up and soaks your face. You stare at it like it's a gift from Ra himself. The evening wind carries the scent of cooking bread and roasting fish from the wealthier homes. Someone drew a tiny fish with wings and wrote, "You survived the docks, barely." He worked these docks when your parents were children. You're not sure if he's impressed by your effort or just waiting for you to quit. You meet the dock foreman, a man with a voice like scraped papyrus and zero interest in your well-being. "Lift with your legs," he says flatly, handing you a rope so frayed it might as well be made of cooked leeks. Your job? Help tie barges to the moorings, carry Free off the boats, and restack them into neat pyramids on the dock for inspection. You now smell like fermented eel stew. Mainstream historical fact. The Nile was Egypt's central highway. You're instructed to unload a barge arriving from the south. It's loaded with ceramic jars of wine and baskets of papyrus. The captain sighs like he's aged a decade just watching you. Historians still argue whether dock workers were trained or just thrown into it. The boatman mutters. You're clearly in the second group. You try to laugh. Your spine says no. The sun climbs. The air thickens. You're drenched by noon sweat, fish oil, river mist. A goose gets loose. It attacks you. You flail. The dock workers laugh. The goose wins. After a particularly grueling hour of carrying wet baskets full of Nile mud for some unclear reason, you're granted a brief break. Lunch is a mashed lentil cake with the texture of clay. Then comes the worst part, cleaning the latrine barge. Yes, that's a thing. Apparently, one of the temple barges has a section designated for ritual disposal, red, a floating outhouse. You wear a wrap over your mouth. It doesn't help. The jars smell through the clay. One leaks. It burns your fingers slightly. Your prayer is interrupted by a sudden splash. Someone fell in. Everyone pauses. A boy surfaces, flailing, spitting river water, and shouting, "I dropped the ledger." He's dragged back up, gasping and empty. Historians still argue whether those ledgers were ever accurate. Someone chuckles. You laugh too. It's the kind of laugh that borders on tears. By the end of the day, you've loaded or unloaded over 200 items. Your shoulders are numb. Your knees feel hollow. He tosses you a bronze tokens, lightly better than copper. You shuffle home in silence. Back in your hut, you find a small papyrus scrap tucked under your mat. You smile. You curl up on your mat and let the river's ghostly breeze cool your blistered skin. Tomorrow, you're told you'll be helping in the workshops. That sounds almost manageable. You close your eyes. A fish dreams of flying. Today, you're headed to the workshops, which sounds deceptively cozy. Like you might spend your hours weaving baskets, while sipping lukewarm date beer and humming folk tunes. But no, you arrive at a compound behind the temple district that smells like burned clay, hot copper, and the unmistakable odor of someone who's been hammering bronze in 110-degree heat since sunrise. Welcome to the industrial lungs of ancient Egypt. The workshop overseer is a woman named Isitnofret. No further instructions, no guidance, just make it round. You do your best. You press, roll, spin. What emerges looks less like a bowl and more like a sickly mushroom. You are gently moved to drying duty, which is workshop code for carrying damp pots outside and not breaking them. She's missing 2 fingers and walks with a limp, but she shouts louder than any priest you've met. Specialized kilns reached temperatures that could turn Nile mud into watertight containers. Your job: walk the unfired pottery from the wheel to the drying racks, a distance of about 50 feet, uphill in the sun. You're relocated again. You rehanded a basket of flax fibers and told to separate the soft from the scratchy. You, however, are told to pump the bellows. The heat here makes the sun outside feel like a spring breeze. You sweat through your elbows. The fire roars with every push, like a dragon exhaling its 3rd coffee. Bronze tools, chisels, and small statues are forged here using ancient molds and open flame. It smells like melted coins and boiled rock. Her head is shaved, her arms are scarred, and when you introduce yourself, she says only, "Try not to bleed," on the bronze. His eyebrows are singed. The workshop erupts. Someone throws sand on it. Another person yells in panic. The fire flares. Your arms are jelly. Your face is steaming, but you keep going. Maybe no one will notice you. Maybe that's a good thing. Isitnofret storms over, smacks the apprentice upside the head with a wooden paddle, and mutters something about training donkeys instead. He gives you a nod of approval, then shrugs. We'll call it wind damage. Keep moving. You volunteer. You'd rather face dust than molten bronze or cursed pottery. As you sweep, a small bead falls out from beneath a workbenchia deep blue faience scarab, handmade, likely destined for a necklace or amulet. You hand it to the beadworker nearby. Not bad, breath boy. Comforting. You re-handed a wrapped date cake and a cup of something that tastes like boiled grass and copper. You drink it anyway. You sit in the shade and listen to 2 weavers argue about whether the goddess Neith invented weaving or just sponsored it. The smell of sawdust is oddly comforting until you're told to carry the finished headboard engraved with sacred falcons across the compound. Historians still argue whether Neith's loom symbol was literal or metaphorical. One mutters while pulling fibers through her teeth. Your first assignment is in the pottery section. You re-handed a lump of Nile silt and a paddle and told to make it round. The potter beside you snorts. That's not a bowl, it's a curse. You try again. Worse. This one collapses in on itself like a collapsing lung. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Egyptian artisans were highly skilled, and their pottery techniques were so refined that some modern-day ceramicists still study them. You sweat through your tunic within minutes. The pots are heavy. Your arms tremble. Your balance wavers. At one point, you trip slightly, and the pot in your arms wobbles like jelly. You catch it, barely. Isitnofret stares at you like she's already engraving your tombstone. Mid-morning, you're rotated into the weaving shed where women sit at enormous looms, threading dyed linen into cloths for temples, nobles, and burial shrouds. It's slow, boring, and oddly meditative until you sneeze into the fibers and send them flying like a pollen bomb across the room. Now you're in the metalworking tent. Quirky tidbit: ancient Egyptian metalworkers were so skilled they could inlay silver into gold using only heated tongs and sand. That's it. Just push and pull on a giant leather airbag to keep the furnace roaring. It takes your full body weight. A smith leans in to adjust the crucible. You've found your niche. Just as you're settling into a rhythm, a nearby apprentice drops a bronze dagger mold, spilling molten metal onto the floor. In the chaos, you keep pumping the bellows. Lunchtime arrives like a blessing. You nod like you understand. Afternoon work takes you to the carpentry shed, where they're carving a ceremonial bed for a nobleman's tomb. It's beautiful, heavy. You trip on a reed mat and stumble sideways, leaving a gouge on the corner. Silence. Everyone stares. Isitnafret marches over. You brace for impact. She stares at the scratch. You exhale for the first time in 5 minutes. As the sun sets, the final task of the day is to sweep the floor. She studies it, then presses it into your palm. Keep it, she says, for luck. You'll need it. You nod. You don't ask questions. You just tuck it into your tunic and carry the broom like a scepter. That night, as you lay on your mat, sore but unburned, bruised but beat-rich, you stare at the scarab under the flicker of your oil lamp. A small victory, a whisper of craftsmanship, a breath of pride. You still smell like hot copper, but for once, you don't mind. The scarab you got yesterday is still tucked in your tunic when you wake, nestled against your ribs like a warm little charm. You decide to keep it there. Maybe it really is working. Because today, you're not on ditch duty, not facing poultry revenge, and not inhaling powdered grain for breakfast. You retold to report to the administrative compound just off the Temple Road, one of the only buildings in the district. That the walls smell of old ink, dried reeds, and bureaucratic frustration. You start off strong, walking briskly, scroll held above your head like a holy relic, but the sun is already scorching, and the city streets are a maze of smells and voices. You limp the rest of the way, but arrive intact. Mostly today, you've been selected for messenger service. Sounds important, right? It kind of is. Messengers are the arteries of the kingdom. But you push on, scroll in hand, eyes on the road. The man in charge there has ink stains on his cheeks and speaks only in riddles. One of them shouts, "Is he the Pharaoh's dog?" You pretend not to hear. You're too busy navigating donkey carts, ceremonial dancers, and a wedding procession that seems to have confused its own route. You duck under garlands, sidestep a dancing priest, and nearly trip over a gift basket of figs and beer. You're told only to bow, hand it over, and leave. Simple. You wait for 10 minutes before realizing he's not being poetic, he's just mumbling. Her eyes are lined with coal, her gold jewelry clinking faintly with each movement. She raises an eyebrow when she sees you. Your forehead touches stone. You hand her the box. You back away. A servant meets you at the door and leads you through cool hallways with painted ceilings and a fountain that smells faintly of lotus. You briefly fantasize about living here. The bed alone is probably softer than every mat you've ever seen combined. Your sweat has officially soaked through the scroll pouch and may or may not have ruined sacred ink. But you make it. He nods after reading the scroll and waves you off. Tell them yes, we'll send the blocks before the moon turns. He hands you another scroll and a piece of bread with onions tucked inside. For the road, messengers like you, usually young, expendable, and blister-proof, delivered written orders across cities, temples, and construction sites, or a full loaf, or a second-hand tunic that doesn't smell like desperation. You lie on your mat, holding the silver piece and the scarab beads side by side, wondering which is worth more. Their feet hardened over time like polished leather. You, however, are wearing borrowed sandals that squeak when you walk and slap the ground like angry fish. It was all tracked with wax seals, which, if broken, were grounds for punishment. It's the same old scribe with the bent nose. How did he get here so fast? He hands you one final scroll. Back to the temple. You don't even breathe near the scroll. The head scribe, a thin man with enormous ears and a crooked nose, hands you a scroll, looks you up and down, and says, "Don't drop it, don't read it, don't sweat on it." You nod 3 times. Your first task is to deliver this sealed message across the city to a stonecutters guild. You dodge vendors selling fish, old women carrying baskets, and a goat that headbutts you square in the thigh just for existing. The foreman at the guild opens the scroll, scans it, and grunts. Lunch and a message. You're practically a noble. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egypt had an intricate system of record keeping. You eat the onion bread too fast and regret it immediately. Your stomach grumbles, then flips. The Nile heat doesn't help. Your next stop is a papyrus workshop. On your way back to the temple district, a group of boys playing with a knucklebone nearly knock you over. Just another day in Thebes. Quirky tidbit. Some messengers in royal service were trained to run long distances without sandals. Late afternoon brings your final task, delivering a carved wooden box to a noblewoman's estate. You arrive at the estate massive gates, polished stone, palm trees rustling in a perfect breeze. The noblewoman is reclining beneath a canopy, sipping wine. You bow. "Pretty," she murmurs, opening it. Then she waves you off like a gnat. Back in the street, you exhale. Historians still argue whether low-born messengers were invisible or simply tolerated, someone says behind you. You walk slowly now. Your legs are aching. Your left heel is bleeding. When you hand the final scroll to the high priest's steward, he looks at you tired, bent, covered in onion, goose bruises, and sweat, and says, "You'll do." He presses a small piece of silver into your palm. Not copper, not bronze, silver, enough for 2 meals. You nod in gratitude, bow once more, and limp back to your hut as the sky turns amber and the Nile glows like liquid fire. That night, the city is quiet. The stars hang low. Tomorrow, no clue, no assignment yet. But tonight, you rest like someone who finally mattered for a moment. You wake up to shouting, not angry shouting, excited shouting. That's always suspicious. By the time you stumble outside, rubbing the grit from your eyes, you see a crowd gathering near the outer road, just beyond the mud brick alley that smells perpetually like pickled fish and regret. Someone's yelling about a royal procession, and just like that, your day takes a sharp turn from ordinary exhaustion to ceremonial chaos. You're not just watching it, you're part of it. Then stand very, very still and try not to look poor. You've been volunteered, which in ancient Egypt is a fancy word for you were standing in the wrong place when someone asked for help. Apparently, the pharaoh's half-cousin's third uncle or some other distant blue-blooded bureaucrates visiting the local temple, and spilled your garlands into a puddle that smells faintly of fermented fish and divine disappointment. The street is long. The street is dusty. The street is full of rocks and donkey droppings and broken amulets and one very persistent cat that refuses to move. And all able-bodied workers are being gathered to prepare the city's main avenue for his arrival. Your task: sweep, decorate, clear debris. You're not trusted with painting, but you are trusted to grind ochre powder into usable paint. You joke back that at least statues don't have to walk. It stains everything: your fingers, your teeth, your dreams. You sneeze red for an hour. At least it's not grave digging. And taught how to kneel on cue, raise your hands just so and shout, "Long life, sweet Nile, long life, strong reed," in unison. You repeat it over and over. You lose your voice somewhere around the 10th chant. You're handed a woven broom, a jug of perfumed water, and a bundle of dyed flower garlands. By midday, you've swept half a mile of uneven stone, dropped your broom 3 times. You already know it's the papyrus scribe with the crooked nose again. That man is everywhere. The roads were decorated, temples were adorned, and commoners were instructed to display joy, whether they felt it or not. You now smell like lilies and rot. It's ... complex. Mainstream historical fact: ancient Egypt's royal visits, whether by pharaohs, nobles, or visiting dignitaries, were huge public affairs. The pole is twice your height and sways dangerously with every breeze. Your arms burn, your back knots. But the worst part: joy is hard to fake when your sandal is full of gravel and your tunic has absorbed 6 flavors of street slime. The temple priests come out next, ordering the workers to paint fresh murals on the outer walls. Your legs tremble. A fly lands on your lip. You're not allowed to swat it. You start quietly naming your past injuries for entertainment: toe bruise, trench blisters, flower lung, goose bite. The other workers joke that you look like a cursed statue. Then comes the rehearsals. Yes, rehearsals for cheering. You haven't tasted something this sweet since, well, ever. The other banner carriers sit around you, legs sprawled, mouths open, eyes glazed. One whispers, "Was that the pharaoh?" Drums thumped. You lift your aching arms as the crowd parts. Here comes the procession. Some weren't even related to the pharaoh, just rich enough to fake it. You're grouped with a dozen others, mostly fellow laborers. He pauses. When you mess up the hand motion for the 5th time, a priest gives you a look, usually reserved for broken canopic jars. You shake them out. They hurt. You accept the flower like it's a crown. Everything hurts. Historians still argue whether this kind of choreographed devotion was genuine or forced. Someone mutters behind you. You don't turn around. The cheers fade. The crowd disperses. The flags lower. The noble himself reclines in silks, his eyelids half closed like a bored lizard sunning itself. Attendants wave fans. A child carries an oil lamp in broad daylight for reasons that remain mysterious. By afternoon, you're reassigned to banner duty. That's right. You now holding one of the tall poles, topped with a flapping linen flag emblazoned with the Eye of Ra. You're not allowed to move for the entire procession, so you wait and wait and wait. The sun dips low. Then music, horns blare. At the center is a golden chariot pulled by white donkeys, and just like that, it's over. He passes. You finally drop the banner. Your hands are locked in a semi-upright position, but you're given bread, fresh bread, with real honey. You sit on the temple steps and eat slowly, savoring every sticky, golden bite. No, someone answers. Just his cousin, probably. Quirky tidbit. There were so many royal family members by the late dynasties that temple officials often staged fake processions for minor nobles to keep them happy. As the crowd thins, the priest who scolded you earlier passes by, then hands you a single blue lotus blossom. For effort, he says, or at least posture. You blink, unsure how to respond. Back at your hut, you set the lotus beside the scarab and silver token, your little shrine to survival. That night, you dream you're on a golden chariot, pulled by donkeys, your banner held high. You wake up with your arms still in the air. You wake up with the taste of honey still lingering on your tongue, and for one dangerous moment, you actually feel good. A bit sore, sure, but not broken, not soaked in river water or grain dust, not bleeding from the foot or pecked by geese. You stretch, you smile, and then the messenger comes. You're on night tomb duty. It's hot during the day, yes, but at night the temperature plummets, and the desert turns ghost cold, and worse quiet. Past that one half-buried statue that always looks like it's watching you, you stop smiling. Workers often labored in rotating shifts, some of which were overnight. The blocks aren't massive, but they're dense. Each one feels like a slab of regret. The descent is narrow and slick with rock dust. One slip, and you'll break an ankle or worse, land in the sarcophagus pit. Tomb duty is a prestigious-sounding assignment that, in reality, involves hauling limestone blocks and dodging scorpions at night in the necropolis outside the city. You're escorted with 6 other workers down the western road, past the city's edge, past the stele and shrines. He examines the progress, mutters something about alignment, and then leaves with a cup of wine and zero intention of lifting anything heavier than his sandals. The tomb site is lit with pitch torches. Shadows leap like dancers along the cliff walls. The powders were sacred. Inhaling them, not great for your lungs. Your job is to take chunks of red rock and grind them into a fine paste using a stone mortar. It stains your hands. It coats your nose. You sneeze and now look like you're bleeding from the face. You're led to a half-finished shaft deep in the rock where masons are carving an antechamber. You're not carving, you're carrying. The dead deserve their colors, a worker tells you. Mainstream historical fact. Royal tombs, especially in the Valley of the Kings, were excavated over decades in deep, angled shafts to protect against grave robbers. You re-handed a sled and instructed to haul pre-cut blocks down a sloped path into the tomb. Another claims a jackal stood at the entrance and then vanished. Historians still argue whether these stories were superstition or early psychological trauma. The tattooed man grins. After your third trip, your legs shake uncontrollably, and more tattoos than visible skin, says, the gods see all. But they don't lift blocks. You sit on a warm rock under the stars and sip warm beer from a gourd. It tastes like damp bread and exhaustion. The mason next to you, a man with chipped teeth, your mouth tastes like dust and minerals and maybe just a little guilt. Copper again, always copper. You're too tired to be disappointed. You step out of the tomb into the crisp morning and realize your feet are covered in red pigment, probably rows of tombs, mud brick houses for the dead. Some are decorated, some are crumbling. You pause at one with a faded inscription and a statue missing its nose, mostly a noble, maybe, or a scribe, or a priest who was especially good at looking bored in sacred ceremonies. It doesn't really help, but the rhythm is oddly soothing. The blue scarab, the silver coin, the lotus, they sit together like little trophies. You nod, that tracks. The tomb's architect arrives, briefly tall, wrapped in linen, eyes sharp as obsidian. It's tedious, it's painful, it's somehow louder than UD expects, tone rasping against stone, like the grinding of ancient teeth. Later, you're assigned to grave pigment grinding. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Egyptians used minerals like malachite and red ochre to paint burial murals. You're told not to spill a drop. You believe it. Someone nearby swears they heard whispering from the back of the tomb shaft. You're not sure, but you suddenly don't want to turn your back on the dark tunnel behind you. Break time comes around midnight. Nearby, someone sings quietly an old work song meant to keep ghosts away and workers awake. Then comes the worst job, sarcophagus sanding. You're handed a hunk of sandstone and told to polish the edge smooth, but it's also strangely humbling. You're shaping the box that someone will sleep in forever. You run your hand across the smooth curve you've made and feel proud, and then you realize your hands are bleeding again. As dawn creeps in, pale and gold over the horizon, the shift ends. Your legs are stiff, your fingers throb. The overseer thanks you with a small nod. He hands you a token. On the walk back to the city, you pass through the outer cemetery. A cat perches on the lintel, blinking slowly. You nod at it. It does not return the gesture. Back in your hut, you crawl into your mat, still wearing your dusty tunic. You add a chip of red pigment to the collection. Then close your eyes. You dream of tombs and stars and colors that don't exist anymore. Your eyes snap open to the sound of drums. Not the rhythmic, sleepy temple kind. These are urgent, fast, loud, and they're coming from the market square. You sit up, groggy limbs still full of limestone dust and regret from tomb duty. You stumble outside to find a crowd forming. And before you can ask what's happening, someone shoves a bundle into your arms and says, "You're needed at the irrigation channel." Of course you are. Apparently, the Nile's floodwaters have been pulling back faster than expected, and the canals and dikes need urgent clearing. You now part of a makeshift crew of laborers conscripted to prevent the entire farming quarter from turning into a swampy disaster. Your day begins in knee-deep mud. The canal banks are slick, your feet vanish into the muck, and every scoop of sludge you lift seems to breed to more. You're handed a wooden shovel so warped by time, it looks like a giant spoon. Egyptians constructed complex irrigation systems, canals, basins, dikes, and shadoofs to distribute water to fields. The tattooed man from tomb duty shows up next to you, lifting with one hand and smirking. "This is the easy job," he says. You, however, are being paid in experience which is just ancient Egyptian for go home tired. Maintaining them was mandatory for both peasants and temple staff. Welcome to the endless dance of Nile maintenance. Everyone's yelling. You're handed a basket and told to help form a human chain, moving mud bricks from a pile to rebuild the breach. Someone else finds a half-buried statuette and swears it's cursed. It looks simple. It is not. The counterweight is awkward. The pole creaks with every pull, and your arms were never consulted about this plan. "Last time I touched one of those," an older worker grunts, "my cousin got eaten by a donkey." You fall twice. The second time, you land face first in a patch of recently deposited fertilizer. Mainstream historical fact. The Nile's annual flooding was both a blessing and a logistical nightmare. You dig, you shovel, you slip, you dig again. Somewhere in the chaos, a boy loses his sandal and blames the gods. The canal holds, the water calms, the frogs retreat. You didn't know that was a job. You wish you still didn't. The mud gets hotter. You smell like fermented leeks and old river. You nod in thanks and tuck it beside your silver, scarab, lotus, and pigment shard. Your collection of suffering. A flock of birds follows you part of the way, probably mistaking you for a sentient swamp. Your muscles don't even ache anymore. They've passed into a state of numb acceptance. You fall onto your mat face first and breathe in the smell of soot, sweat, and onion. You don't ask questions. You just dig faster. The sun climbs. Eventually, someone passes around gourds of water and a bowl of pickled radish. You slurp both with alarming speed. You don't have the energy to chew. You just sort of absorb the onion through sheer will. Then you re-moved to the Shadoof station, a seesaw contraption that lets you lift water from the Nile and pour it into canals. You strain and lift, strain and lift. Your back sings, your palms blister. You silently begin to hate him. Quirky tidbit. Some wealthy estates outsourced their irrigation work to villagers, paying in bread and beer. You dig them out with a stick, muttering apologies to whatever spirit you surely offended to deserve this. Midday brings disaster. Of course, it's the crooked-nosed scribe, again. You can't tell if he's a scholar or just a ghost who haunts failure. A small canal wall collapses. Water spills everywhere. Mud, reeds, frogs, and some kind of wriggling eel explosion. You're waist deep in chaos. This goes on for 2 hours. You carry, pass, slap bricks into place. Your arms shake. Your brain melts. You lose track of time. Then it rains. Yes, it rains. Rare, brief, barely more than a spit from the sky, but enough to turn everything into slip-and-slide doom. You don't even bother cleaning it off. Eventually, the breach is patched. You lie on a reed mat under a palm, soaking wet and utterly broken. A farmer walks by and tosses you a small roasted onion. For effort, he says. You nod. Later, as part of cleanup, you're told to clear snail clumps from the intake gate. The gate is clogged with slime and shells and more worms than you care to count. Historians still argue whether canal laborers were volunteers or conscripts, someone says as they step over your mud-covered foot. At sundown, you're handed a token. Bronze this time, a little heavier than copper. The walk home is slow, sticky, full of reeds in uncomfortable places. You reach your hut just as the sky turns violet, and yet, somewhere in the muck of it all, you helped. The water flows, the canals hold, the fields are safe. You sleep without dreams, because your body refuses to waste the energy. This morning, you're not woken by shouting or drums. Instead, a polite knock at your doorframe startles you from a dream involving flying chariots and weeping frogs. You sit up, dazed, to find a temple courier waiting. You've been summoned, he says. Library duty. The difference in atmosphere is immediate. No stench of fish, no sweat-soaked tunics, no chance of falling into a canal. Instead, incense, stone floors swept daily, and the hushed rustling of papyrus. You blink. That sounds civilized. Moments later, You're walking through the cool, quiet halls of the House of Life, the temple's sacred library and archive. You inhale deeply, you almost cry. Your job is to dust them, unroll them carefully for inspection, then roll them back with precision. No creasing, no oil from your fingers, no sneezing. Sounds simple, right? You are not prepared for the weight of papyrus, but you don't, because you're given a job. House of Life was the name for centers of scholarly activity, often attached to temples. It looks blank until sunlight hits it, revealing the phrase, "Tell Menes his cat is in the grain jar." You say nothing, strangely soothing, but you quickly learn that knowledge weighs more than stone. Your arms ache from lifting wooden catalog boxes. Your fingers cramp from rolling. Your eyes blur from reading tiny glyphs etched in black, red, and sometimes blue. Some are centuries old, others still smell of fresh ink. You sit on the steps outside the scriptorium, listening to the faint chanting from a nearby shrine. A novice sits beside you, balancing a quill behind his ear and reciting a list of animal gods in alphabetical order. Your task: assist the scribes in cataloging newly arrived scrolls and maintaining the papyrus stacks. You bow in apology and return to work, now holding your breath every time you touch sacred paper. You carry it like it's made of glass, weaving through the temple corridors, past painted columns and low murmurs of prayer. The physician accepts it with a nod and waves you off. Mainstream historical fact: Egyptian libraries, particularly temple ones, were filled with scrolls on medicine, astronomy, law, prayers, and administrative records. Anything. He hands you a folded papyrus. A record, he says, for your efforts, practice. But you roll it carefully and place it beside your silver, your scarab, your pigment chip, your lotus, and your red-stained pebble. Your name, the date, the phrase. He served the word. You retold to assist a particularly stressed novice who keeps smudging ink and swearing under his breath. Another scroll details a famine from 200 years ago, caused by locusts and angry river spirits. One has recipes for perfumes. Another is just the phrase, "Don't trust the butcher," repeated 20 times. You don't ask. You re-brought to a back room where towering shelves hold hundreds of scrolls, bound with linen strips. Naturally, you sneeze. A priest looks up from his scroll and raises one eyebrow so slowly it's like a sunrise of disapproval. You make a mental note to read that one later. The scrolls vary wildly: hymns to raw inventories of fish rations, dreams interpreted by moon phase, complaints about goat theft. It contains a partial myth involving a crocodile, a moonbeam, and a talking pomegranate. No one agrees on the ending. You glimpse one with surgical diagrams, knives, bandages, organs sketched in eerie detail. Quirky tidbit: some scribes used invisible inclement juice and sunlight to write hidden messages. You find one such scroll. The work is quiet, repetitive. Midday, you're offered a cup of warm barley drink and a bit of dried fig. Historians still argue whether temple knowledge was hoarded or shared freely. He says, without looking at you, you nod. Of course they do. After the break, you're taken to the scribal school, where young initiates are copying texts onto pottery shards called astraca. He hands you a clean shard and says, "Write something." You hesitate, then you write. The mud remembers every footstep. The novice blinks. Poetic, he says. Also, depressing. You smile. It is depressing. Later, you're asked to deliver a scroll to the temple physician. You peek at the scroll title, on the way back, remedies for night screaming. Back in the archive room, the scribes begin discussing a damaged scroll recently recovered from a tomb. Historians still argue whether it's metaphor or nonsense, someone says, as they clean it gently with a feather. As the sun begins to dip, the head scribe approaches you with a look you can't decipher. You unfold it later in your hut. It's simple. You stare at it for a long time. You don't quite know what it means. Then you lie down, your fingers still sticky with ink, your mind echoing with ancient verses. Tonight, you'll dream of God's whispering in forgotten tongues, and you'll understand just enough to want more. The quiet dignity of library duty didn't last. This morning, the summons comes from the temple kitchens, a place you didn't even know existed until now. You re-led behind a courtyard and through a carved doorway into a space that smells like smoke, spice, and sharp onion. You are now a kitchen assistant. You stir. Cooking was a sacred and logistical task rolled into one. You, unfortunately, are neither sacred nor logistical. And eventually, you get blamed for everything that goes wrong. Which means you chop. Mainstream historical fact: temple kitchens in ancient Egypt were responsible for feeding not only priests, but also visiting dignitaries, temple workers, and the gods themselves via offerings. She's about 5 feet tall, shaped like an amphora, and has the voice of a lioness who hasn't had her tea. You pour the grains and begin pressing down, rolling back and forth. It's fine for the first 5 minutes. Then your wrists start aching. By minute 10, your arms are vibrating. By 20, you've aged 10 years and begun reciting your funeral rites. She thrusts a dull knife into your hand and points at a basket of leeks. Don't cry on them, that's my job. The head cook is a woman named Sina. Your eyes burn so badly you miss the garlic pile and start peeling lotus stems instead. You stir with a reed paddle that weighs more than your dignity. Every bubble that pops releases a smell halfway between raisin stew and river burp. A priest walks in and nods at the vat. Smells like piety. You chop. The leeks win. Perfect, she says. The gods love surprise flavors, possibly ever. You're so grateful you nearly cry into your barley. Again. You have no idea if she's serious. Your next job is to grind barley for bread dough. It's done with a cornstone, a flat slab, and a handheld roller. It's part performance, part art, part stress. The trays must be symmetrical. The bread must sit just so. The dates must shine, which is basically everything. Senate has a meltdown. You're ordered to make a bland grain porridge, which somehow burns anyway. Keep going, Senate barks. You're almost halfway. You look down. You've ground, maybe. A spoonful, maybe. Your job is to stir the mash, slowly, carefully, constantly. You're not allowed inside. No one speaks during this handoff. Even Senate lowers her voice. If it burns, the smell will linger for weeks, and the gods will apparently be deeply offended. The food is stored or offered. The kitchen quiets. Senate hands you a sliver of dried fish wrapped in a grape leaf. You press harder, but also you're full. For once, truly full. Quirky tidbit. Because of the sand in their grinding tools, ancient Egyptians consumed a lot of grit in their bread. Over time, it wore down their teeth. Even mummies with perfect bones often had dental disaster zones. Next comes the beer vat. Yes, beer. Thick, porridge-like, semi-fermented liquid bread that serves as both beverage and meal. The vat is waist-high and hot as a sauna. You nod solemnly. You have no idea what he means. Midday, you're handed a bowl of lentil stew and flatbread. You're moved to offering duty arranging prepared dishes on ceremonial trays to present to the gods. Cenote inspects your first attempt, frowns, and swaps to onions. There, divine balance. Later, a novice priest collects the trays and carries them into the inner sanctum. Historians still argue whether the gods truly consumed the essence of offerings. You chew a fig and ponder this. In the afternoon, the kitchen turns chaotic. A visiting scribe from Memphis has food allergies. No garlic, no lentils, no honey, no onions. You're reassigned to dish duty. Dish duty, in ancient Egypt, involves scraping clay bowls with reeds, rinsing them in bitter water. You wrestle with a jug of rinse water, accidentally tip it, and flood the corner of the prep area. Cenote glares. You brace for impact. Instead, she snorts. Congratulations, you washed the floor too. At sunset, the fire pits are cooled. You didn't ruin everything, she says. Keep this for when you do. You take it gratefully. You return to your hut with sore arms, stinky fingers, and a faint smell of roasted chickpea permanently embedded in your skin. Each one is work. You lie down, belly heavy, mind light, and for the first time, you dream of nothing at all, just warm bread and the sound of someone not yelling. You've survived temple kitchens, tombs, and canals, but today you're summoned for something different. A noble family has requested a day assistant for household errands. You don't know what that means, but someone presses a clean tunic into your hands and says, "Try not to embarrass the entire city." Great. You're escorted through wide avenues, past painted homes and trimmed date palms, into the estate of Lady Tia, a merchant's wife known for owning 3 lapis mirrors and an imported monkey. Not necessarily in that order. The moment you arrive, you re-handed a broom made of palm fronds and instructed to sweep the courtyard without disturbing the doves. There are many doves. They regard you with suspicion. Cleanliness and elegance were part of elite daily rituals. Every time you get close to one, it coos angrily and flutters a few inches to the side, as if personally offended. The jars are delicate, shaped like flowers or animals. You polish gently, afraid of smudging, until a jar rolls off the table. She barely glances at you, but gestures toward her monkey. You freeze. You sweep around them, slowly, awkwardly, trying to avoid both feathers and droppings. Mainstream historical fact. Wealthy Egyptian homes had central courtyards with fountains, painted columns, and sometimes trained birds. These weren't just decorative, they were status symbols. Next, you're told to polish copper perfume jars in the ladies' chamber. You try coaxing him down with a fig. He takes the fig and stays exactly where he is. It bounces, does not break. You survive. For now, you line them up. You rearrange them. You wonder if this is how pyramids were designed by fruit-inspired madness. Lady Tia enters shortly after. She is tall, regal, and has a voice like honey poured over a knife. The elite didn't just eat to live, they dined to perform. The bundle contains silks and bead jewelry, to be delivered to a trader in exchange for imported wine. You clutch the bundle like it's sacred scripture and follow the steward, who walks very fast. Take him to the garden. Lady Tia doesn't react. Donkeys bray. Eventually, a jar of dark red wine is handed over. You carry it back through the noise, dodging elbows, goats, and the occasional pickpocket who thinks better of it when he sees your death grip on the jar. Someone is selling perfume. Another is selling honey-dipped locusts. A boy tries to sell you a live turtle. You resist, but she doesn't not react. So, success. He hands you a tiny alabaster vial of scented oil. You do not want to take the monkey to the garden. You do take the monkey to the garden. You place it next to your little collection. The silver coin, scarab, lotus flower, grape leaf, fish wrap, pigment chip, and temple scroll. The scent clings to your skin, your mat, your thoughts. It's 10 verses long. There are metaphors involving honey, sandals, and fishnets. You do not laugh. You earn points for that. The monkey immediately climbs your shoulder, plucks at your hair, and screeches every time you walk near a bush. You spend the next half hour as a human jungle gym. Eventually, the monkey tires of you and bounds back indoors, leaving you scratched, figless, and emotionally drained. You're told to assist the cook in preparing a midday refreshment tray. Simple, right? Until you're asked to arrange the fruit by color and scent intensity. You stare at the pomegranates like they hold the secrets of the cosmos. Quirky tidbit. Wealthy Egyptians flavored their snacks with imported cinnamon and honey, and even used date syrup, ice stored in underground cellars. You serve the tray, trembling slightly. Next, you're given a linen bundle and told to accompany the steward to the market district. The market is chaos. Vendors yell over each other. At the trader's booth, the steward haggles while you stand quietly. Back at the estate, you return to the courtyard. A servant hands you a harp. You'll accompany the evening poetry. Excuse me. You confess that you do not, in fact, play the harp. Then pretend, she says, it's only for background atmosphere. You sit in the corner, plucking very softly, while a young poet recites a love ode to someone named Petal of the Moon. Historians still argue whether elite leisure was sincere or performative, the poet says after his reading. You're not surprised. Everyone is arguing something in this era. At sundown, Lady Tia's steward approaches. Payment, he says. Equality for your wrists. You sniff it. It smells like crushed flowers and cold water and something mysterious you can't name. You return home in your clean tunic, now creased and grape-stained, holding the precious vial like it's made of gold. Tonight, your hut smells faintly of perfume. You close your eyes and dream of alabaster rooms and monkeys that behave. You are not noble, you are not rich, but today you passed for something like it. Today begins with birds, not the passive, fluttery kind from Lady Tia's courtyard, nor you're at the aviary, specifically the one maintained by the temple for ritual offerings. Ducks, geese, ibises, even falcons. You are handed a clay bowl of dried grain and led into a wide, fenced enclosure that smells exactly how you'd expect 1,000 sacred birds to smell. You are now a bird feeder. At first, it sounds peaceful. Then you open the grain bowl. You are immediately mobbed. The ibis was sacred to Thoth, while geese and ducks were common in meals and rituals alike. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptians kept large temple aviaries, often raising birds both for symbolic reasons and for actual sacrificial offerings. You try scattering the grain evenly. The birds descend like feathery bandits. A duck stares at you with malice in its soul. A goose grabs the hem of your tunic. An ibis pecks your foot. You back away slowly, scattering grain like you're making an offering to the chaos gods. Each one a prayer, a plea, or a gesture of devotion. It's strangely moving until one of them shifts. You yelp. You try not to think too hard. You hum softly to distract yourself. A goose honks in rhythm. For one brief moment, you're a choir. After feeding, you're tasked with cleaning the nesting troughs. There are feathers, broken shells, mystery goo. You're not sure who thought this was a good idea. Archaeologists have found entire underground catacombs filled with bird mummies, often wrapped with surprising care and buried in ceramic jars or stone niches. Quirky tidbit: Egyptians' mummified birds is by the thousands. You pass by one of the storage chambers. Inside, dozens of wrapped ibises, arranged like scrolls, waiting to be shelved. You're offered a reed basket full of boiled eggs and a triangle of flatbread. You sit beside the nesting huts and eat slowly, watching a line of ducks file past in perfect formation, like soldiers of the absurd. "Oh, just air settling," says the aviary keeper, chuckling. You do not chuckle. Historians still argue whether these birds were beloved companions or simply divine tools. Later, you're invited dragged to assist with the ritual bathing of a falcon. You're not sure who trained it. You're handed a bowl of scented water and a piece of linen. Duck 8. Unusually aggressive. Ibis 3. Glows under moonlight. The falcon eyes you. This involves careful observation of each bird's coloring, stance, and aura. You are not allowed to speak. You are only allowed to stand still and look reverent. You eye the falcon. The falcon wins. You step back and let the keeper do the work while you refill the water that at least you can handle. Mostly, by midday, you're covered in feathers, bird scratches, and what you sincerely hope is just mud. A passing acolyte leans in. You nod, then swat at a pigeon pecking your bread. The afternoon is spent in record keeping. That's right, Teachbird has a tablet noting hatch date, health, and purpose. You hold the wax stylus while the keeper dictates. Goose 14, limping. You pause. Sorry, what? The keeper waves you on. Inside joke. Offerings will be made. Hymns will be sung. You're told not to attend too dirty, the keeper says affectionately. Offered by the aviary keeper. Sure. As the sun begins to lower, a priest arrives to inspect the flock for ceremonial selection. The soft glow flickers across feathers and brick walls. A goose nestles under a fig tree. A falcon perches silently above. You try, you really do. But the ibis from earlier walks past you and poops directly onto your foot. You don't move. The priest raises an eyebrow. The aviary keeper nods approvingly. That's dedication. Eventually, the priest selects a few birds for the coming feast of Thoth. The chosen animals are gently placed into reed carriers. As dusk falls, your final task is to sweep the courtyard, feed the night flock, and set oil lamps at the enclosure's corners. You pause before leaving. Despite everything, the noise, the stink, the scratches, you feel oddly calm. The birds, in their chaotic way, have routine, purpose, presence. You return home, slowly, barefoot, too tired to care. Your foot still squishes slightly. In your hut, you light your own lamp and set the day's token next to the others. A small feather, white with a black tip for balance, he said. You lie down, limbs stretched, eyes heavy. Outside, a bird calls once. Inside, you fall asleep to the sound of wings in your dreams. You wake before dawn, not because someone shouts, not because you're summoned, but because the breeze shifts through the reed wall of your hut, carrying the scent of lotus, ash, and salt. Today, you decide, is a river day, not for leisure. You know better, but still something draws you toward the Nile's edge. Maybe it's the quiet, maybe it's the ache in your hands that asks for cool water. Maybe it's that UVE finally learned how to listen to the city's rhythm, and this morning it hums toward the river. You step outside barefoot. The path is quiet. Shops are still shuttered. You step in, trying not to tip it over. You fail twice. A few priests cross in silence, heading toward morning rites. A donkey brays once, then falls silent. Its seasonal rhythms dictated the calendar, the economy, and the shape of daily life. A crocodile surfaces near the far bank, then slips away silently. You try not to think about it too hard. The city is still half asleep, just like you. The fisherman grins. You wait, you listen. While the fish roast, you help wash gourds in river water, slice onions, and wrap bread in palm leaves. You sit in the shade, fingers working rhythmically. It reminds you of the library scrolls, the pigment grinding, the temple trays. It's simple, messy, perfect. He gives you a small fish scale charm, punched through with a reed needle and strung with twine. At the riverbank, a fisherman waves. You're late, he says, though you weren't invited. Others, like your new friend, swore by singing to the water. The river hears, he says, between bites. He hands you a paddle and nods toward a papyrus skiff bobbing gently. But eventually, you're gliding slowly along the river. Mainstream historical fact. The Nile was the lifeblood of Egypt, used for transport, fishing, washing, irrigation, even religious ceremonies. You help lay out woven nets, weighted with stones. The sun rises behind you, golden and soft, casting the water in bronze. Birds call from the reeds. The first tug on the net is exhilarating. You help haul it in, arms shaking. Inside, tilapia, catfish, wriggling and glistening, enough for breakfast. You're invited to shore and help start a small fire in the sand. Quirky tidbit: some fishermen in Egypt used woven baskets as fish traps, luring fish with crushed dates. You believe him. After breakfast, he shows you how to braid palm fibers into rope. A wound, a joke, a lesson. It's all the same thread hands, making something from nothing. You part ways after noon. For your troubles, he says. You tuck it in your pouch and walk home, past the granaries, the brewery, the blacksmith's stall. You nod to people you recognize. They nod back. You're not a tourist anymore. You're part of this world, in all its sweating, aching, beautiful absurdity. Back in your hut, you lay out your collection, one last time. A silver coin from flood duty, a blue scarab from the temple floor, a lotus flower from the riverbank, a grape leaf fish packet from the kitchens, a red pigment shard from tomb duty, a scroll scrap from the library, an alabaster vial from the merchant's wife, a feather from the aviary, and now a gleaming fish scale. Each piece carries a story, and all together they tell your journey through a single impossible day in ancient Egypt. And still, somehow, you're standing. So now, your body sinks gently into the earth-packed floor beneath you. The lamp glows low. The wind hums, soft and distant, through the reeds. And outside, the Nile flows dark and deep and eternal. You've felt its mud between your toes. You've lifted its water with your aching hands. You've cursed its insects, blessed its breeze, and watched it shimmer in both moonlight and firelight. You came here wide-eyed, barefoot, soft-palmed. You came here unready, thrust into 1,000 lives you didn't ask for. Lives filled with sweat, silence, ritual, mistakes, and a kind of patient, grinding grace that you'll carry forever. Swatted flies in kitchens and soothed sacred birds. You've bled, you've laughed. Its fires dim, the chants fade to memory. You've learned that even in a world ruled by gods and kings, it's the quiet workers, the faded names who keep the wheels turning. You've touched temples, shared barley beer, dug out channels, ducked under tomb ceilings, and here you are now, whole or close enough. No more sand, no more goats chewing your sandals. The city of Thebes exhales. Your eyes grow heavier. Your muscles release their grip. No more scrolls, just stillness and the scent of warm earth. If you listen, really listen, you can still hear the Nile whispering. It says, "You made it." You smile, just barely. And sleep takes you, slowly, completely, like a boat drawn into the current. End of script. Sweet dreams.